Here.
I guess
It's like we can't say we're advertising until next week. Because we're just approving the
got it.
actual.
And we have a meeting Tuesday anyway.
Yeah, we do.
This is a holiday coming up. We should have requested a non-holiday
Meeting of the State of Rhode Island Board of Elections will come to order. It is Thursday, November 2nd, 2023, and it is 2:05 PM. Madam Secretary, please read the roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chairwoman Nadira.
Here.
Vice Chairman Scholes.
Present.
Member Beckman.
Here.
Member Connors.
Present.
Member DeSimone.
Present.
Member Giacone.
Present.
Member Johnson.
Present.
Executive Director Robert Raposa.
Present.
Legal Counsel Raymond Carchia.
Present.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. First item on today's agenda, the board may discuss and vote to approve the minutes of the meeting of October 3rd, 2023. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Vice Chair Scholes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Johnson. Any discussion?
Yeah, just note that I'll be abstaining since I was not in attendance.
Mr. Connors will be abstaining from the vote as he wasn't present. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's a vote 6 and 1 abstention. Item number 2, the board may discuss and vote on the job description for the executive director position for the Board of Elections presented by the subcommittee. Mr. Schultz, would you like to report on the subcommittee action?
Yes, the subcommittee met twice, once in early October and the second today. And we approved language for the general statement of duties and responsibilities and minimum qualifications and education for the executive director's position, which will be opened up shortly. So we approved it with one correction. I think you all have copies of it, and you have a copy of that report. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
So the correction was, again, if you would just.
The correction was on the second paragraph, instead of the incumbent, it was replaced by the words executive director. The very first word.
See that?
And the second bullet.
The second
Second
bullet,
bullet,
correct.
that's
Yes. And it was corrected between the subcommittee meeting and our meeting here.
Yeah, right, and we have to thank Patty for
That is
that.
pretty good.
Fast work.
Thank you, Patty. So do we have a motion to approve the job description with that modification?
I have a question.
Yes, of course.
For any of the subcommittee members, and I did watch part of the meeting, but what were the major changes, you would say, to the original?
Well, we changed the educational requirements, the experience, and then we put in some more information concerning their duties. We spelled out in more detail.
Yeah, a lot of, so some of the discussion, which was really helpful, also to have members from the staff and Secretary of State's office give input as to, because some of my questions were the way it was previously drafted, it required the executive director to sort of do a lot, like it's worded it like the executive director did a lot, which he, like of the day-to-day, which he does, but as an executive director, we also wanted, and with the feedback of the staff, it was more of overseeing and supporting and informing. As a leader should be. We also included information around cybersecurity, which was a really, really important issue. And I think that was it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I'll move to approve the language as it sits right now.
We have a motion by Mr. DeSimone. Do we have a second to his motion?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Bettenker. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous. Item number 3, the board may discuss and vote on the relocation of 2 polling locations for the City of Cranston for elections beginning in 2024 at the request of the City of Cranston Board of Canvassers. Current location, William R. DuTemple Elementary School, proposed Eden Park Elementary School. Current location, CLCF Building Gym. proposed Garden City Elementary School. Mr. Reposa, would you like to begin the conversation?
Good afternoon, Chairwoman and members of the board. On Tuesday, October 10th, the Cranston Board of Canvassers unanimously voted to approve the relocation of 2 default polling locations at a Board of Canvassers meeting held in the Cranston City Hall. The Board of Election staffs were notified of this on the same day. Precinct 0713 is currently at the William R. Du Temple Elementary School located at 32 Garden Street, which is outside of the precinct boundary lines. The Board of Canvassers are requesting to relocate the poll to the Eden Park Elementary School located at 108 Oakland Avenue, which is located within the precinct boundary lines. Eden Park was originally approved as a polling place in spring of 2022, but subsequently was deemed unusable due to construction of accessible issues by the school department. The construction is now complete, and the local Board of Canvassers has voted to resume using this location for future elections. The staff concurs with this request. There are currently 2,379 registered voters in this precinct. The second location, Precinct 0714, is currently at the Cranston League for Cranston's Future. It's known as CLCF, located at 970 Pontiac Avenue. And they are requesting to relocate the poll to the Garden City Elementary School at 70 Plantation Drive. Both of these locations are located within the precinct boundary lines. The CLCF building is currently being remodeled and may not be ready for next year's elections. To be proactive, the Cranston Board of Canvassers secured the Garden City Elementary School building to be used for future elections conducted in the city. The staff has inspected this facility and agrees with the request made by the Board of Canvassers in Cranston. There are currently 2,282 voters registered from this precinct. Prior to 2022 redistricting cycle, both the Eden Park Elementary School and the Garden City Elementary School were default polling locations, but were unavailable due to construction. In my opinion, it is a good decision by the Cranston Board of Canvassers to return these locations, and it is also returned to these locations. It's also in the best interest of the Cranston voters. Rhode Island General Law 17-11-1 and also the board's rule and regulation on relocation of polling places, which was adopted on August 5th, 2022, will be executed for this request. The Cranston Board of Canvassers, prior to an election in which these 2 locations will be used, will post notice on the Cranston webpage and the state-operated central voter registration system will be updated to reflect the current polling locations. And all of these voters, all 2,383 households in these 2 precincts will receive a postcard informing them of the location of their polling place. A 2024 election advertisement will also be placed in the Cranston Herald, notifying voters of the 2 new locations, as well as having signage on the 2 locations that were used in 2022, notifying voters of the correct location for the current election. As both of these locations are public schools, my recommendation to not confuse voters due to the notification required that these 2 locations be used as polling places for the upcoming presidential preference primary held on Tuesday, April 2nd, due to a Title 17 law change last year. Public schools are now closed for presidential preference primaries, and these 2 should be used. I have received notification that Cranston is planning on using these two locations. If there are no questions, I ask that you approve the request for these two polls from the city of Cranston.
Thank you, Mr. Reposa. Just before we do that, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to add. He's summarized it well, hasn't he, Nick? Yes. Does anyone have any questions of Mr. Reposa or Mr. Lima? Okay, hearing none. Do we have a motion to approve the relocation as spelled out?
I'll make a motion to approve the relocation as proposed by the Cranston Board of Canvassers.
We have a motion by Mr. Jack Boney. Do we have a second?
I'll second
Seconded by Mr. D. Simone. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous vote of the board. Item number 4, the board may vote to certify the voting equipment to be used in the special election Congressional District 1, special election Senate District 1, Providence, special referendum East Greenwich, and special referenda North Kingstown. Mr. Reposa?
On Friday, October 6th, a public announcement was posted for voting equipment testing to be conducted on Tuesday, October 10th, beginning at 8 a.m. and continuing until completed daily. The testing was conducted at the Board of Elections for the upcoming Tuesday, November 7th special elections, as just mentioned by the chairwoman. The testing did begin at 8 a.m. as posted and concluded at 1:41 p.m. on Wednesday, October 11th. In the material that you were provided for today's meeting, for this agenda item, you will find 4 reports. There is Report A, there's Report B1, there is Report B2, and finally, Report C. A total of 171 DS200 voting machines and 96 express vote devices were tested for this upcoming election. Report A was produced at 8:09 a.m. on the day of the testing and depicts that all of the DS200 and the DS850 ballot tabulating devices did not contain any votes and are displayed as 0. The second report, B2, was produced at 1:24 p.m. on Wednesday and depicts the total of the 4,091 ballots which were used to test the equipment. This report, which is produced by the Election System and Software Network located within this building, was compared to the key produced, which is referred as Report B1, to be used to verify the results in B2. As you can see, the numbers do match. Report C was produced at 1:41 p.m. and shows that all of the voting equipment that was tested to be used for next Tuesday's election was reset to 0. As previously stated, this LNA testing ended at 1:41 p.m. on Wednesday, October 11th. Yesterday, I received a correspondence from Kathy Placencia, Director of Elections for the Elections Division at the Department of State, certifying all the printed paper ballots for the upcoming elections were accurate and that in accordance with Rhode Island General Law 17-1914. They have reviewed both the English and the Spanish screens on the express vote in the virtual environment provided by Election System and Software, and they certify that the screens as well as the ballots are also accurate. 158 DS200s and 128 express votes will be used to conduct the Congressional District 1 election. 9 DS200s and 7 express votes will be used to conduct the Providence Senate 1 election. 4 DS200s and 3 express votes will be used to conduct the East Greenwich referendum. And finally, 6 DS200s and 4 express votes will be used to conduct the North Kingstown referendum. During the testing, 2 DS200s were replaced. One was a result of a screen issue, and the other involved a modem. Delivery of the tested equipment and applicable election supplies began to the respective communities on Monday, on October 30th. For the elections to be conducted, we sent 119,000 ballots, 198 supply boxes, 1,355 voting booths, and all are being delivered by Hogan Movers. Deliveries are scheduled to end on Monday, November 6th. The Board of Elections mail ballot drop boxes opened on October 18th and are available 24 hours a day until 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 7th at 23 locations, including the Board of Elections and the Department of State. As of this meeting, 1,163 ballots have been retrieved from the drop boxes by 4 employees of the Board of Elections. Early voting began on Wednesday, October 18th, and concludes at 4 p.m. on Monday, November 6th. As of this meeting, 9,336 eligible voters have cast a ballot for the upcoming elections. As of this meeting, we have also received 4,956 of the 7,626 mail ballots that were requested for the upcoming elections. Mail ballots must be received by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 7th at the close of the polls. This concludes my report on the logic and accuracy testing of the voting equipment and an election update. If the board does not have any questions, I respectfully request that you vote to approve this item on today's agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Reposa. Any questions of our executive director? Yes, Mr. Jack Boney.
Just a question here. I noticed this is a page missing. I assume that that's where the logic and accuracy results from the actual elections and not the bond questions would be.
Which report are you referring to?
So I've got the key right here, right? That's
B1.
B1. And then that includes the Congressional District 1 as well as Assembly District 1. And then the LNA testing reports do not include the results from that. Or am I missing it? Is it on somewhere? Looks like all just the bond questions or the local questions.
So on page 1 of B1, you should start with the repping Congressional District 1.
Yep.
And then you
Yeah.
have 3 other races.
Good.
Is that correct?
No, we've got one other race, which is the senator. And then the rest look to be
Then you
local
have the
questions.
senator, correct. Because some of the communities also have referendum questions on the ballot with
Yeah.
CD1.
Yeah, I understand that. My question, I guess, is on like B2 and C, why the results from the testing for the congressional, for example, is not on there.
It should be. It's on the back. They're back to back pages.
I think we might be missing a page because it goes from page 1 of 7 to 3 of 7.
Yeah. we've got missing two.
But you should have 2 of 7. You don't have 2 of 7.
I-
If you
Oh, maybe
flip,
I got-
if you flip 1 of 7 over, is
Yeah.
2 of 7 there?
No, 3
it's
of
3 of
7.
7 on the backside.
I am sorry. My report says 1 of 7, 2 of 7, 3 of 7, etc.
We're missing 2 of 7, and it looks like we're missing 4 of 7.
You would miss 4 of 7.
Oh, wait a minute, maybe 4 is on the back of 5.
No, it's on
No,
back.
we're missing
I have
4.
it here.
So we're missing 4. That's-
Looks like we've got only the
That's what
odd pages.
I have it here. But
Excellent.
we can make copies for everyone.
That'd be helpful, Bob.
Will you make the copy now?
You have to just run them back to back.
I mean, we could probably just.
And they
Take a look at it.
pass them down. Okay.
I don't think.
You don't need more paper.
We'll save the paper, Patty.
Unless somebody wants one specifically, I don't have a problem.
No, they're going to just pass it down.
Do you have the C report?
I do have the C report. It's just- You don't have the back of that one either?
No. Looks like
Yeah,
it's like only
missing-
the odd
missing
pages.
the back.
for
Here's
print
the back.
back.
Here's C.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you on your toes.
That was a good catch, Randy.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the clear up C. Oh, you do? That's good.
One other question you want me to ask now, or do you want me to wait?
You could ask it now, I think, while we're perusing. Sure.
Bob, I have one other question. With regard to the drop boxes, I know we require video outside the drop boxes. Is anyone monitoring whether or not the video is still active? Is there some type of certification that they're sending us that says that their video is still being saved?
Let me check into that and I will email the entire board.
Because the only reason I ask that is because of what happened in Connecticut. The election just got overturned because someone was stuffing the ballot boxes. So,
Before I comment, I want to get verification that all the cameras are working.
great, thank you.
Bob, I'll just add to that, that in my weekly email to local boards, I do send them a reminder to make sure their video feeds are working. And we had a couple instances where they weren't several weeks ago, so we had a technician go out there and repair them. So they do get weekly notification that they need to check their video feeds.
I did see that in your report,
And
Miguel.
Miguel, do you know how long they're saved for?
90 days,
Sorry?
90 days.
Okay.
Does that satisfy your question?
It does.
Any other questions of Mr. Reposa relative to his report and also the certification of the voting equipment?
I just have one quick question.
Sure.
What was the number of early voters?
The early voters as of yesterday was 9,336.
Okay, thank you.
So at this time, do we have a motion to certify the voting equipment as outlined by our executive director? Moved by Mrs. Johnson, seconded by Mr. D. Simone. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, unanimous vote of the board. Item number 5, the board may discuss and vote to rescind the NCOA rule and regulation as the Office of the Secretary of State will be promulgating a new regulation from their office. And I know Miguel is going to speak on this. Bob, is there any, what is the date of this regulation? Because I'm looking at it and thinking, this has got to be like an antique.
I believe the original date was
2007, okay. That's helpful to know. With that, Miguel, would you like to explain?
Absolutely. Good afternoon, members of the board. Before you today, I present a proposal to rescind the board's rules and regulations for local boards of canvassers and periodic updating of voter registration records. And the primary reason for doing this is due to the current practices in how we administer elections and voter registrations today, and changes that were made under the Let Rhode Island Vote Act of 2022. As some background, these regulations, as we just mentioned, were established by the board on November 15th of 2007 as part of formalizing the process of voter registration list maintenance using the United States Postal Service National Change of Address Program, or as I refer to it, the NCOA program, which was originally implemented way back in 1993 and under Rhode Island General Law 1719-26 and 1719-26.7. Originally, this program was conducted every 2 years, but was required under the Let Rhode Island Vote Act of 2022 to be a 4 times per year process. However, I should note that the NVRA prohibits list maintenance from occurring within 90 days of a federal election. As part of this process, the Secretary of State sends a notice to any voter who has submitted a change of address with the United States Postal Service, but has a different address on their voter registration record. Voters are required to return that notice indicating that they have either their voting address has not changed or they have moved. If they have moved, they can return the form providing the new Rhode Island address or indicate if they have moved out of state. If they have moved out of state, returning the signed form will cancel their Rhode Island registration. If the voter does not return the notice within the prescribed time, they will be placed on an inactive list of voters. They will still be allowed to vote, but would be required to complete an additional affirmation certifying that their address is correct prior to voting. If the voter's postal address is in the same city or town as their voter registration address, their address on the voter registration record will automatically be updated, and a notice will be sent to the voter's new address. Now, it's important to note that with the repeal of these regulations, none of this process that I just outlined will change. And the list maintenance under the NCOA program will continue as required under federal law and state law, as I just detailed. Originally, these regulations were established to formalize the process that was done, requiring that forms be returned here to the Board of Elections, where our staff would then distribute them to the local boards of canvassers for processing, along with any regular paper voter registration forms that we would receive from voters. When these regulations were established, the board regularly received large volumes of paper voter registration forms, as that was the primary method of registration at the time. A large volume of paper voter registrations would be distributed by us to the local boards on a frequent basis, but this happens with much less frequency now, as most voters, as you can imagine, register online or automatically at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Additionally, the NCOA process is already largely conducted by the Secretary of State as part of their list maintenance programs. They obtain the data from the Postal Service, they compare it to the records within the Central Voter Registration System. They design, print, and mail the notices to voters. And Rhode Island General Law 17.9.127C requires the Secretary of State to establish rules and regulations to promulgate this process. These forms would typically in the past be delivered to our P.O. Box at the main post office in Providence. However, over the past 10 years, we have conducted as many as 18 Title 17 special elections, and mail ballots for these elections are returned to that same P.O. Box. So even when the NCOA process was done every 2 years, these forms would many times be commingled with ballots for those special elections, slowing down the processing of ballots by the staff. And given this increase by the Let Rhode Island Vote Act and the frequency of this occurring 4 times per year rather than every 2 years, this would become even more of an issue that we seek to avoid. Due to the increase in the 4 times per year for this NCOA process, with these changes in the Let Rhode Island Vote Act and the Secretary's statutory requirement in regulating the process, as well as the other list maintenance programs that they already have in place, it is the staff's position that this regulation be rescinded and that these forms be returned to the Secretary of State's office by voters or directly to the local boards for processing, under rules established by the Secretary of State. We have met with the staff of the Elections Division of the Secretary of State, and they agree. Their office has already begun the process of acquiring their own P.O. Box at the Providence Post Office to facilitate this process, as well as to receive other notices related to other list maintenance programs that they already have, which they conduct on the Electronic Registration and Interstate Consortium, otherwise known as ERIC. I would be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Do any of the members have a question for Miguel? Clarification, question?
I have one question.
Yes, Mr. Schultz.
Miguel, under section 17-9.1-26, I believe that the board, among its duties, prepares the forms and the wording of those forms. So how would repeal of this regulation affect the duties of the board in that regard?
It would happen in the same way that it does today, whereas although the statute does require that, the Secretary's office does contact us and send us drafts of the form, which we do sign off on essentially. So, but they do design the form and we have our input into the design.
Okay, so the input in that design, would that input be submitted to the board for its approval?
In the past, it has been something that has been done administratively, since it's an every 2-year process. However, that's certainly something that it can be done and presented to the board.
Yeah, because I'm only looking at the statutory duties of the board. I want to make sure we comply with that, especially with these new forms.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scholes. Any other questions?
I'll just have a question of council.
Yes, Mr. DeSimone.
Ray, is there any issue with us rescinding this either on a situation where there's some gap where between this regulation and whatever the Secretary of State promulgates? So my thought was to rescind it and have it coincide with when their new reg is promulgated, or is that not something we need to do?
Do we have anything in place at the Secretary's office for their current practice? What would be in place between now and the time the regulation is put in place?
Well, the secretary, the liaison for the Secretary of State is here. However, I would imagine that the same process that is done currently would be done. The only difference would be is the forms would go to their PO box and will be distributed by their staff rather than the staff of the Board of Elections. Is that,
Did you wish to comment, Rob?
Yeah, that's accurate. We would just continue the process as we've always done it, where we contact the voter and then let them respond to us, and we would forward the information to the cities and towns.
I mean, I guess, is there a policy or a regulation to that effect, or is this just a practice?
Currently the policy is in the rule and reg that the board oversees, and then governed by state law behind that. So
Okay.
we will continue that process.
So Rob, if you look at our regulation, is it basically, the one that is being stricken, is it basically inconsistent with what you do right now?
It is consistent with what we do now.
Okay.
Except we're going to have the notices come back to our office and not the board. Because the
So-
regulation specifies that the notices come back here, and then your team packages them or does whatever to get them to the cities and towns.
I think it would still be appropriate to rescind the regulation. We have a statute now in place that would dictate how the Secretary's office does the process, which is consistent with Chapter 9.1. And there really would be no need to have any regulation in existence that would have some language, although not a lot, that would be somewhat inconsistent with what you're going to do, which is to reroute or direct that information between the secretary and the locals.
So I guess my question is there any gap created by rescinding this between this and the state law?
I don't believe so. I mean, I defer to your counsel, but I
Yeah,
don't believe so.
And I would agree with that, with what Rob is saying, because the statute itself just says how it will be done. And the secretary creating that practice would be more appropriate, since it is the secretary who's going to be responsible for doing it with the locals under the change of address program. So it would make more sense to do it that way.
Okay, and then my last question is, are we subject to public hearing because we're rescinding an active regulation, a notification and a public hearing beyond what we have today?
What do you mean by that
For
exactly?
the rescission. So when we're promulgating regulations, we have a public comment and we have a period of time where we do allow that, whether we need to or not, we still do that.
So you're saying to actually have
I'm just
period of-
asking you,
a public-
is there an obligation to do that in the rescission? And I just thought of it now, or I would have
Yeah.
asked you last week.
That would have been very helpful.
I know, because I sit
think-
in that seat
I know.
sometimes.
And I think you relish that. It's therapeutic for you. But I think it's an open question, because the regulation does reference the APA and says that it was passed under the APA, which, as you know, by law, we're not subject to, although we have voluntarily complied with some aspects of it. I think that it would be better to just have notice that the regulation you should take a vote that it shall be rescinded, and 30 days or 40 days hence, so that there can be any kind of public comment on that. It's difficult to answer on the fly because
No, I understand, right?
it really is not something, we're not subject to the APA.
Mhm.
But I see the reference here back, and I think back in '07, we did it routinely. And I think that was a good practice. I think it's become more complicated since the more recent modifications to the APA. But out of an abundance of caution, I recommend that you do it that way. So 30 days at least of public notice that this is being rescinded. If there's a comment that people want to make, they can do so. Would that affect the secretary's implementation of their practice right now?
No, we're going to continue to do the NCOA process. We have, as Miguel mentioned, because the Let Rhode Island Vote Act requires us to do it 4 times a year, with the exception of a presidential year that has 3 federal elections, we can't do it within 90 days of a federal.
Yeah.
So our time frame is very limited, and so we're going to do it in December. We're going to do it again in April, and I believe in May.
Mhm.
To do it as many times as we can in an election year.
And let's assume for a second that Rob's answer was different, that it would be diametrically opposed. Even then, the fact is that if a regulation is contrary to a current statute, the regulation must yield to that anyway. So I'm comfortable with what we're doing. I'm comfortable with still providing the public with notice, but it's almost a matter of just additional process and notice. But I don't expect anything to come of it.
So
I think we should,
Can we make a
your vote
motion to
should be
rescind?
to rescind the regulation with at least 30 days' notice to the public in the event that there is any need for comment that the public wishes to post on it.
I'll make that motion as referenced by council.
Motion by Mr. DeSimone. Do we have a second? Seconded by Mr. Johnson. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Unanimous vote of the board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 6, the board may vote to meet in executive session on a personnel matter pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 4246-5, subsection A1. Do you have a motion to go into executive session? Moved by Mrs. Johnson, seconded by Mr. Who seconded the motion? Very good. Motion by Mr. Scholes, seconded by Mr. Scholes. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It's unanimous vote. Item number 7, the board may vote to meet in executive session pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 4246-5, subsection A2 and 4, and 1725-5, subsection A7I, to discuss and/or vote on possible violations of campaign finance laws and potential litigation in 2 campaign finance matters. Do we have a motion? Motion by Mr. Scholes. Do we have a second? Seconded by Ms. Bettenker. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Unanimous vote to go into executive session. It is, what time is it?
So Bridgeport.
20 of 3.
2:42.
2:42 to be exact.
Rescinded.
Seal the minutes of the executive session. Moved by Vice Chair Scholes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. D. Simone. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, unanimous vote. Would you like to report out?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr.
There are two
Marcaccio?
matters to report out from executive session. The first was involving a matter in which Campaign Finance Director Richard Thornton provided a summary of campaign finance activity of Augustino F. Silva, including reference to delinquent filing of reports with related statutory fines. Vice Chair Scholes moved to refer the matter to the Central Collections Unit. That was seconded by Mr. D. Simone. All 7 members were present and voted unanimously in favor of the motion. The second matter likewise was presented by Mr. Thornton regarding campaign finance activity of Glendaleese Cologne regarding delinquent filings and resulting statutory fines that were imposed, with the recommendation by Mr. Thornton for referral to the the Central Collections Unit. A motion was made by Vice Chair Scholes, seconded by Mr. Jacoboni, to refer the matter out to CCU. That motion was adopted with a unanimous vote by the board, none opposed. That is
Thank
it,
you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Marcaccio. So at this point, with no further business, do we have a motion to adjourn at 3:16 PM? Moved by Vice Chair Scholes. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Mrs. Johnson. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We are adjourned.